When the victorious Israelite army was returning home after David had killed the Philistine, women from all the towns of Israel came out to meet King Saul. They sang and danced for joy with tambourines and cymbals. This was their song: Saul has killed his thousands, and David his 10,000s. This made Saul very angry. "What's this?" he said. "They credit David with 10,000s and me with only thousands. Next they'll be making him their king." So from that time on, Saul kept a jealous eye on David. What's up, cool people? My name's Matt. Welcome back to our Bible study. Alright, so we're looking at 1 Samuel chapter 18 right now. Basically, recent events have, Saul is still sitting active king of Israel, but he did some bad stuff. God didn't like that. So God had Samuel also anoint David to be the next king. And they've had a couple of interactions so far, Saul and David have. Most recently, David faced the giant Goliath, defeated him, and that pretty much, spurred the most recent victory over the Philistines, which was a just smashing success all around for Israel. So that's kind of what's been going on, and stuff to keep in mind as we get into this chapter. So, without further ado, here we go. 1 Samuel chapter 18. After David had finished talking with Saul, he met Jonathan, the king's son. There was an immediate bond between them, for Jonathan loved David. From that day on, Saul kept David with him and wouldn't let him return home. And Jonathan made a solemn pact with David because he loved him as he loved himself. Jonathan sealed the pact by taking off his robe and giving it to David, together with his tunic, sword, bow, and belt. Alright, I'm going to pause there for a sec. So, at this point, then Saul is basically, David is staying with Saul at his palace, ? Wherever Saul is sitting as king, David's basically around there, for the most part. Now, there was a previous thing where David would come in and play the harp for Saul to help soothe him when he was troubled. That was actually before the whole Goliath thing. There was some weird questions about, okay, shouldn't David have been there already at that point? But no big deal. Now it's said pretty much outright that wasn't gonna be a question or an issue or anything moving forward. So, and then it says Jonathan loved David. Now, this is one of those cases where it would be really interesting, in my opinion, to get into the Hebrew and all that to see, because there are multiple Hebrew words that tend to be translated as love. So, depending on which one it is, that could be a key difference between, loved like a brother, or, loved even more than that. I'm not going to get into too much detail there, but I will say people who try to examine this particular relationship and give that as a reason for saying gay marriage is okay, that's not necessarily what's going on here, at least to my understanding. But I'm not going to comment on that issue all around. That's not, like... I'm also not wanting to, hate on or, diminish anyone's belief, and certainly from a civil standpoint, I'm not going to say anything about that particular topic. Freedom is freedom, and it should be free, not just for the people who believe the same as me. So from a civil standpoint, no issues there. It's certainly more of a question / issue looking at it from a biblical standpoint, but still, that's not what I'm here to talk about. But the point is that Jonathan cared significantly. There was a strong bond between him and David. So, anyway, with that established, let's move on to verse 5. Whatever Saul asked David to do, David did it successfully. So Saul made him a commander over the men of war, an appointment that was welcomed by the people and Saul's officers alike. When the victorious Israelite army was returning home after David had killed the Philistine, women from all the towns of Israel came out to meet King Saul. They sang and danced for joy with tambourines and cymbals. This was their song: Saul has killed his thousands, and David his 10,000s. This made Saul very angry. What's this? He said. They credit David with 10,000s and me with only thousands. Next they'll be making him their king. So from that time on, Saul kept a jealous eye on David. Yeah, so there's where the jealousy's starting to come in. But, David was doing well in everything that he did, so it's not like it should really be that surprising that David was very successful as a commander. And, okay, right here in verse 6, where it says David had killed the Philistine, I'm assuming that refers to Goliath. Because he was a Philistine, specifically of the town of Gath, and that's the only noteworthy Philistine that we have heard about thus far that David has fought and killed. So, there's basically singing, dancing, praising in the streets upon the return. Now, footnote here at cymbals. This type of instrument represented by the word cymbals is uncertain. Huh, interesting. But, okay, so they've got tambourines and some other probably handheld instrument that might make a more metallic noise. I don't know. In any case, they're praising David more than Saul, really. And this is what causes Saul to get jealous. So, then we get to verse 10. The very next day, a tormenting spirit from God overwhelmed Saul, and he began to rave in his house like a madman. David was playing the harp as he did each day, but Saul had a spear in his hand, and he suddenly hurled it at David, intending to pin him to the wall, but David escaped him twice. Saul was then afraid of David, for the Lord was with David and had turned away from Saul. Finally, Saul sent him away and appointed him commander over 1,000 men, and David faithfully led his troops into battle. David continued to succeed in everything he did, for the Lord was with him. When Saul recognized this, he became even more afraid of him. But all Israel and Judah loved David because he was so successful at leading his troops into battle. So, okay, let me check the footnote there, a tormenting spirit. Okay, could also be understood as an evil spirit. But that's the same kind of deal that was happening earlier on when it mentioned David playing the harp to help soothe Saul as he was troubled with this kind of spirit. So, this was a pretty common thing, actually. That's why it says David was playing the harp as he did each day. So then it says Saul tried to pin him to the wall. Not necessarily kill him yet, but probably not good intentions either way. And it says Saul was afraid of David because he was, well, at least in his mind, it was because of being concerned about David taking his place. And usually, you know, when a new king takes the throne, the old king gets killed. So that's probably a factor in Saul's fear as well. So it seems like Saul appointed him as commander over 1,000 men with the idea that, all right, let's go and have him fight a bunch, and probably sometime during all the fighting, he's gonna die. And then I won't have to worry about him taking my throne. But David just keeps piling up wins. And so, like, that basically did nothing to help Saul. And in fact, it makes David even more beloved by the people. Which probably just further adds to Saul's worry about David supplanting him. Anyway. Alright. Then we get to verse 17. One day Saul said to David, I am ready to give you my older daughter Merab as your wife. But first you must prove yourself to be a real warrior by fighting the Lord's battles. For Saul thought, I'll send him out against the Philistines and let them kill him rather than doing it myself. Who am I, and what is my family in Israel that I should be the king's son-in-law? David exclaimed. My father's family is nothing. So when the time came for Saul to give his daughter Merab in marriage to David, he gave her instead to Adriel, a man from Meholah. So Saul didn't actually want to give his daughter to David. That was just supposed to be David's motivation for going and fighting these battles against the Philistines. Also, David is surprised by the honor in a way. And so maybe also because of that, and David being like, I don't deserve this. That might have also played into Saul being like, okay, well, I guess if you don't want my daughter, then I'll give her in marriage to this other guy. But the idea was, again, to get David killed in battle. Didn't happen, though. Footnote there. Okay. So, but just different conjunction kind of thing there. But replacing that does make it seem more like, you know, David's words and feelings on the matter didn't actually play much into Saul's decision. Okay. Moving on to verse 20. In the meantime, meaning while, David was out fighting battles and not actually earning the hand of Merab in marriage. In the meantime, Saul's daughter Michal had fallen in love with David, and Saul was delighted when he heard about it. Here's another chance to see him killed by the Philistines, Saul said to himself. But to David he said, Today you have a second chance to become my son-in-law. Then Saul told his men to say to David, The king really likes you, and so do we. Why don't you accept the king's offer and become his son-in-law? When Saul's men said these things to David, he replied, How can a poor man from a humble family afford the bride price for the daughter of a king? When Saul's men reported this back to the king, he told them, Tell David that all I want for the bride price is 100 Philistine foreskins. Vengeance on my enemies is all I really want. But what Saul had in mind was that David would be killed in the fight. So even more of Saul trying to get David killed. But David, is actually... So it says Saul's daughter Michal actually fell in love with David. And David's concern really was being able to pay the bride price. Not that he didn't like Michal. He just figured it was impossible because he was too poor. Kind of like the whole, in Disney's Aladdin, like he kind of had the idea that he needed to be a prince to even have a chance at, getting a word in with Jasmine, never mind actually, marrying her or anything like that. I get a feeling David's got a similar mentality here. So when David mentions the concerns about the bride price, Saul goes, you know what, just get me revenge on my enemies. I want proof that a bunch of Philistines are dead. And again, Saul's idea is for David to be killed in the process of trying to do this. And that's why he was actually happy about his daughter falling in love with David. Because he figured, all right, this would be another perfect opportunity to try and get David killed. Anyway, after this exchange, we get to verse 26. David was delighted to accept the offer. Before the time limit expired, he and his men went out and killed 200 Philistines. Then David fulfilled the king's requirement by presenting all their foreskins to him. So Saul gave his daughter Michal to David to be his wife. When Saul realized that the Lord was with David and how much his daughter Michal loved him, Saul became even more afraid of him, and he remained David's enemy for the rest of his life. Every time the commanders of the Philistines attacked, David was more successful against them than all the rest of Saul's officers. So David's name became very famous. So all these attempts to get David killed just gave David more opportunities to succeed and to gain favor in the eyes of the rest of the people. So, there's just this constant, moving away from Saul, or, there's this constant, in Saul's mind, shift away from him being, the popular, successful king, to David being the popular, successful, probably gonna be king if things keep going. So the jealousy just builds up further and further, and his desire to get rid of David increases more and more. Also, just noting, David doubled the requirement for the bride price. I guess just to... Well, it probably happened that it was just... There was a particular battle where they were successful and killed that many Philistines, and then David was like, okay, now's my chance, let's just go ahead and show my commitment to marrying Saul's daughter. So yeah, and really for quite a while we're going to continue to see this transition of things getting worse and worse for Saul, and, going over to things getting better and better for David. But we'll have more on that in the next chapter, and probably a few more, but definitely the next chapter. Okay, so we basically have Saul getting jealous of David because of how successful David is, and Saul's also just kind of getting worried about how the people are starting to like David more and more, and he's basically worried about losing his throne. That's what it really comes down to. So we get some maybe somewhat subtle, I don't know if subtle is even the right word, but like less direct attempts of Saul's, other than maybe the spear thing, to kill David, essentially. Because then the threat to his throne is gone, right? I mean, it's not like God would appoint somebody else to be the next king if David died. No way that would happen. I say that sarcastically, of course. But anyway, Saul has been unsuccessful thus far, and actually in his attempts to get David killed, David has actually just come across more opportunities for success. And so things are getting better and better for David, and worse for Saul. We'll see how that progresses as we move into the next few chapters. But anyway, as always, like and share if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe to the channel and click the bell if you're on YouTube to get updates when I post new videos. If you're seeing this anywhere else, give me a follow or whatever you need to do for that platform. Look down in the description for info on social media pages and all that good stuff. Different places to find and follow me and keep up with my activity. And of course, leave comments down below there with any thoughts you have. So that'll do it for now. Hope you're all doing well. Hopefully I'll see you soon for another video. But whatever the case is, till next time, stay cool, people.